The American dream didn't just get more expensive, it was hijacked. Your parents bought their home for 3 times their annual salary. Today, you're expected to pay 8 times your income for the exact same 4 walls. You aren't failing. You're playing a game where the rules were changed while you were sleeping. Stop waiting for the housing crash. It's not coming. At least, not the way they told you. We've been gaslighted into believing that working twice as hard for half the house is just the economy. It's not. It's a systemic transfer of wealth. While you're scrolling Zillow like it's a fantasy novel, billions in institutional cash are making sure you never own that normal house. That starter home? It's not a shelter anymore. It's a financial weapon. And if you don't understand how this weapon is being used, you're going to be a renter in a country your parents used to own. Here is the part that should terrify you. Even with interest rates doubling, prices refuse to drop. In this video, I'm going to show you the sequel to 2008 that nobody is talking about, and why the 2026 crash everyone is waiting for is actually a trap.
To understand the trap, we have to look at the crime scene. But we aren't going back to 2008. That was just the dress rehearsal. We're going back to the 1970s. Back then, math was boring. A house costs 3 times your salary. It was a shelter, a place to keep your stuff and raise your kids. It was a liability on your balance sheet, not a speculative asset. Then, America discovered leverage. Leverage is financial caffeine. It makes the economy feel like it's on a massive high, right before the heart attack. Banks realized they didn't just want you to have a home. They wanted you to have debt. They made money easier to get, which made prices climb faster than your paycheck could ever keep up with. By the late 90s, the mindset shifted. A house wasn't a place to live anymore. It was a winning lottery ticket. We heard the same lies then that we're hearing now. They aren't making more land. Housing always goes up. You can't lose. Then 2008 happened. The system didn't just break, it exploded. Millions lost everything. For a brief moment, the world learned that housing is a bubble like anything else. But then, the banks and the government did something even more dangerous. They didn't fix the system. They printed their way out of it. And this is where the story takes a dark turn. Because while you were busy trying to recover, a new type of player entered the game. A player that doesn't need a bedroom, doesn't care about the school district, and has more cash than every family on your block combined. History is repeating itself. But this time, the buyers aren't even human. And 2008 is going to look like a minor glitch compared to what's coming in 2026.
After 2008, the world's central banks hit the panic button and launched the most dangerous financial experiment in history. They dropped interest rates to 0 and flooded the system with trillions of dollars. Suddenly, money was cheap. But here's the secret. When money is cheap, everything else becomes expensive. Stocks, crypto, and especially real estate didn't just grow, they exploded. But if you thought that was a boom, 2020 was the supernova. The Federal Reserve did something unthinkable. They effectively doubled the entire U.S. money supply in just 24 months, launching it from $4 trillion to nearly $9 trillion. Think about that. Nearly half of all the dollars in existence were created in the last few years. Then they dangled the bait. 2.7% mortgage rates. It was a once-in-a-lifetime deal that millions of people couldn't resist. People weren't buying houses anymore. They were buying cheap debt. This massive injection of artificial demand didn't just raise prices, it poured rocket fuel on them. In just 2 years, home prices surged by 40%. That's not a healthy market. That's a fever. But here's where the story gets truly bizarre. In every other era of history, when the rocket fuel runs out and rates go up, the market crashes. But this time, the laws of gravity have been suspended. The bubble isn't popping, it's morphing into something much more dangerous. In any rational world, the housing market should have cratered by now. It's basic math. When mortgage rates jump from 3% to 7%, monthly payments don't just go up, they double. For a normal family, that's the difference between a comfortable life and financial ruin. Affordability hasn't just dropped, it has fallen off a cliff and hit terminal velocity. We are currently living through the worst housing affordability crisis in modern history. So why aren't prices crashing? Because the market is being held hostage, and the kidnapper is a disappearing prize. America is short by nearly 6 million homes. But it's not just that we aren't building enough, it's that the homes we do have are locked in a vault. Meet the golden handcuffs. Millions of homeowners are sitting on 2.5% or 3% mortgage rates. For them, moving isn't just a hassle, it's financial suicide. Why would anyone trade a winning lottery ticket for a parking ticket? If they sell, their next normal house will cost them double the interest. So they stay put. They don't sell, they don't move. The result? The market is frozen. It's not a healthy boom. It's a 100-mile traffic jam where nobody can move, nobody can enter, and the only people winning are the ones who don't need a place to sleep. The game isn't just broken, it's paralyzed. But while the average family is stuck in this frozen trap, a new predator has figured out how to thrive in the cold.
But a supply shortage isn't the whole story. It's just the cover story. There's a new player in the game, and they aren't here to build a life. They're here to harvest yours. We've transitioned from a world where homes were shelter to a world where homes are yield. Institutional investors, private equity giants, and massive rental conglomerates have entered the chat, and they didn't come for the vibes. They came because in a world where the dollar is being devalued, a rent check is better than gold. This is the invasion nobody wants to admit. Ordinary families aren't just outbid by their neighbors anymore. They're being outmuscled by balance sheets. And here's the problem. Balance sheets don't get emotional. A balance sheet doesn't care if the kitchen is cute. A balance sheet doesn't wait 45 days for a mortgage approval. A balance sheet shows up with a briefcase of cash and an algorithm that says buy. You're playing a game of Monopoly where one player started with 90% of the board and a printing press in their basement. The game feels rigged because it is. You're no longer buying a home. You're competing for a financial product against the people who invented the product. And if you think the Fed raising rates is going to stop them, think again. High rates just make it easier for the cash rich to crush the debt dependent.
So, where does that leave you? Right now, we are stuck in the most bizarre housing standoff in modern history. Prices are at record highs, rates are punishing, and the American dream is currently on life support. But if you're waiting for a 2008-style everything must go fire sale, you're waiting for a movie that already finished its run. 2008 was a crisis of bad math and too much supply. 2026 is a crisis of bad policy and zero inventory. The sequel is never the same as the original. Back then, homeowners were drowning in debt they couldn't afford. Today, they're sitting on mountains of equity and locked into 3% interest rates. They aren't selling. They aren't moving. They're effectively retired from the market. And that is the real trap. Everyone is looking for a boom or a bust. But what if the answer is neither?
What if the future is just years of frustration? We're entering the sideways era, where prices don't crash, they just sit there, stubbornly expensive, slowly being eaten by inflation while you wait for a dip that never comes. The market isn't going to heal with a dramatic explosion. It's going to heal through a slow, painful grind where incomes have to spend a decade catching up to the mess the money printers made. The 2026 crash isn't a price collapse, it's a collapse of opportunity. But once you stop waiting for the world to break, you can actually start building a plan. Because in a rigged game, the only way to win is to stop playing by the old rules.
If you're a first-time buyer standing on the sidelines, it feels like the world is rooting against you. Because in many ways, it is. You didn't print the trillions. You didn't hike the rates. You didn't turn homes into yield.
Yet you're the one being handed the bill for a party you weren't even invited to. But here is where most people lose the game. They become addicted to crash predictions. Every year, a new expert promises a collapse. Every year, someone else says prices will double. They're all guessing. Economists, billionaires, and yes, even YouTubers. The smarter question isn't when will housing crash? That's a gambler's question. The master's question is, what happens if I'm wrong? If you buy and prices fall 10%, can you survive the decline? If you wait and prices rise another 15%, can you ever afford to get in? If rates stay at 7% for the next decade, does this house still work as a home? This is called risk management. It's the only tool you have left in a rigged market. It's what separates the people who build wealth from the people who just complain about it on the internet. The market might be a sequel to a disaster, but your financial future doesn't have to be. Stop waiting for the big reset and start building your own big plan.
Warren Buffett once said, "Price is what you pay. Value is what you get." That is the entire housing crisis in one sentence. Millions of people are obsessed with the price, but they've completely lost sight of the value. Housing prices don't make sense because houses stopped being just houses. They became speculative vehicles and inflation hedges. Somewhere along the way, shelter became secondary to yield. Will prices crash? Maybe. Will they keep rising? Maybe. But history teaches us one brutal lesson. Assets can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent, but fundamentals always matter in the end. So don't build your future on a YouTuber's prediction. Build it on flexibility. Build it on cash flow. Build it on patience. In a world where everyone is screaming about the next mega crash, your independent thinking is the most valuable property you will ever own. The goal isn't to win the housing market. The goal is to make sure the housing market doesn't win against you. If you're tired of the crash bait and ready for the actual math behind the madness, you're in the right place. I'm unmasking the truth behind the Mag 7, the housing trap, and the global wealth transfer every single week. Hit the subscribe button and join the Zariahfinance community. Let's stop guessing and start strategizing. Because the system is rigged, but your future doesn't have to be. I'll see you in the next one. Watch the next video now for more insight.